and colleague, Paula Harris, Paula Harris is with me today and has been a key person for the Disclosure Project and a support for what we're doing since, oh gosh, the 1990s.
1990s in Italy.
Yes, in Italy. And thanks to Paula Harris, we got some amazing interviews with the Vatican astronomer and Monsignor Balducci and Max Poggi, the captains of Alitalia Airlines, and many other great cases. So I'd like to thank Paula for everything she's done to help move this field forward. And many people don't realize this, but she's been involved since the, I believe, 80s with J. Allen Hynek, Colonel Corso, very key people, seminal figures in this effort going back for 40 years. And she's just done an enormous body of work over the years and is one of the great unsung heroes of this field, in my opinion. And she just consistently does amazing work. She's also become really adept at doing close encounters of the fifth kind and making contact. And she really understands consciousness and the whole spectrum of what this subject entails. And of course, I'll let you speak, Paula, about, you're seeing the movie and your reaction to it.
Well, first of all, let me say that we do go way back, and I support your work, Stephen. My God, we're on the same wavelength, and we've been at it a long time. I'm not even going to tell you what my age is, but anyway, I basically will always support anything you do. I started working with your films with Sirius,
Right.
where Crestone was Sirius when we did Sirius, and it was an amazing film. And then I helped Michael Mazzola with a little bit with Unacknowledged. But this film, when I saw this film, I was telling Stephen, look, call me about this film because it's probably the best film I've ever, ever, ever seen on this subject matter. And I'll tell you why. I'm an educator by profession. I have a master's in education. I taught school for 30 years, high school. I taught at the American Overseas School of Rome for 15 years, and I taught here in Boulder, Colorado. And when you try to present material to an audience, you have to present it in a certain way. And Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind is that kind of film. It starts with nuts and bolts. It starts at the beginning with the actual cover-up. It has the actual people. You get the sources. You don't get gossip. You don't get conspiracy theory stuff. You get the actual sources speaking, the actual heroes. You mentioned Corso, you mentioned other people I was involved with bringing out their testimonies. Those people are heroes, just like you are, Stephen. And it starts like that. And then it goes on to show the implications of the cover-up. And the implications of the cover-up for this planet are serious.
Right.
They are stopping humanity from going forward. And they say also the messages we're getting from our cosmic cultures is that our spiritualities does not match our technology.
Right.
So one of the things that we have to do is become awake and aware. And for people that don't understand the word consciousness, it means being super awake, but then you have to add the component of responsibility. If you know what's going on and you are conscious, or you're conscious when you're making contact, then you have a responsibility. You can't do nothing about it.
Right.
So the film has in the middle the cover up, the where we should be in 2020. Especially having worked with Colonel Corso, I realized, Stephen, that the real secret I didn't know was the military-industrial complex's acquisition of the technology. I thought it was other things. I thought it was religion. I thought it was panic. I thought it was these other things. But when there's a vested interest in keeping these things secret, then what needs to happen is there has to be kind of a revolution. And with the vested interest in the military-industrial complex, and I must add also that because of what I know with what happened in Italy, when you're looking at the New York Times and everything, there's an agenda behind every single solitary disclosure piece. And it isn't necessarily for the raising of consciousness for mankind. The very end is what touched me, Stephen. I was so emotional, especially when you used Colonel Corso's words at the very end, New World, if you could take it. I started to cry. I was totally still. I tried to understand the implications of that film, and it came across. The message at the end was what really made it different from like Unacknowledged and Serious. So this film is Graduate School of Disclosure. This film is very spiritually oriented, and this film affects humanity. This film really affects people.
Well, we've had so many great folks who, from all walks of life, who've seen it, who've reached out to us from every country. And, I recently heard from Demi Lovato, who's a pop singer who was just completely taken by this and we have a new app out that, I don't know if you know this, Paula, that lets people network with each other in their own communities to form contact groups. And it's called the CE5 Contact app. And apparently she had gotten it, and on her birthday a few weeks ago, used it with a few friends and had an amazing contact experience. So what we're finding is that people from all walks of life are doing that. And this is why, that whole last part of the film is about the science of consciousness, non-locality, where people in meditative states and in higher states of consciousness affect those around them, that those people don't even know they're there, but it affects how they think and feel in a way that's very positive, that is evolutionary. And that's that 1% effect that we talk about. But now what we're trying to do is reach that 1% of the global population, which is about 80 million people. But that's very doable because we have a lot of influencers and people coming on board who are actually looking at the film, and then they're getting the app and they're trying it, and they're having these amazing experiences like you had at Mount Shasta, remember, some years ago. And so I think that, to me, that's where it all is. It isn't, what the Oval Office might do or Congress. It's what are the people going to do? And it's the people are responsible for the future of this planet, not these, so-called leaders who for 70 years have dropped the ball on this.
Yeah, I wanted to tell everybody, when I did an interview with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, and he told me he was doing these psychic experiments from the moon. And in those days, they were using cards and they were using all kinds of things. And he said that the people that were receiving the messages in Florida, that it was 90% accurate. If you can send thoughts from the moon and it's 90% accurate, can you imagine what the thought process could do on the planet?
Right. And that's what's important is you figure that, because one of the key parts of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which, by the way, has been #1 on Amazon and iTunes and all over the world. It's very unusual for a crowdfunded indie film to do that, is that it makes this point that there isn't any barrier in space or time to consciousness and thought. And so we're used to thinking in a straight line, but in reality, it's a holographic conscious universe. And those words, what that means is every point in space and time is connected to every other point on a deep level of these dimensions of consciousness and thought. And that's what these ETs certainly understand, because they're going beyond the speed of light among star systems. And so if we're going to be ambassadors to them and contact them, we need to understand this paradigm of how the universe actually functions. And that's why, those experiments that were done at SRI and with Russell Targ, and then what Edgar Mitchell shared with you is so important. There are a lot of data points. A lot of people think this is some kind of voodoo, but there's such solid scientific evidence and proof of what's called entanglement or entangled, and non-locality in physics, dealing with consciousness and thought. And of course, you add to that that the ETs have devices. And you've seen many cases like this where people will see there'll be a little box or something, and the ETs are actually transmitting and receiving thoughts. So they not only can do it innately, telepathically, they have technologies that interface with quanta of thought, a discrete thought that's intended, a clear intention. And that's why the CE5 protocols actually work, is because it's actually based in a science. And some of the, of course, people would say that science goes back to the ancient Vedas and the ancient teachings of native cultures and the Aboriginals of Australia with dream time and what have you. And it's true, it does. But you add to that the fact that we are dealing with advanced technological civilizations that not only understand the science of consciousness, but have developed technologies that are very subtle trans-dimensional electronics that interface with mind and thought. And that's why they receive what we're sending to them so clearly.
I know, and it's very well explained in the film, Stephen, because when you watch that film, for me, because I know you and I've dealt with CSETI and everything, I mean, it's familiar, but for the people, maybe like Demi Lovato or other people that for the first time, it's an explanation. It isn't woo-woo. It's science. Right. It's a science that has been around for a long time, and right. It's also a way of going on, of dealing with things, of doing small groups of contact groups, which are all over. Right. Your contact groups are making contact, and they're doing it in a way that is very respectful.
Right. It's not like watching dolphins at SeaWorld. It's very much an honoring of the civilization's presence, not only in our past, but in our current world and future, and with the objective of us creating sort of a global movement of ambassadors who are humans to these civilizations in a way that's peaceful. Because, I always tell people, we take a couple steps back and you begin to realize that, my God, how have they been dealt with since World War II? Shot at, downed, vivisected, killed, tortured, denied, ridiculed, caricatured in the sort of the worst sort of fascist ways, racist ways that you'd see right out of Nazi Germany, is how most of ufology portrays aliens. So, and movies, Hollywood, like Independence Day and all these sort of fear-mongering things. So there has not been a global response that is responsible, but also enlightened and encompasses the correct paradigm, understanding the physics and the science of consciousness, with it being linked to a purpose that's peaceful, that's going to lift all ships. And help humanity, but also help the cosmos, because the Earth is interwoven into life in the universe. And what happens on this planet is actually of great consequence elsewhere.
That's actually true. And most of my work now, because of the Disneyland factor in ufology, and I'm an educator. It's really hard on me to see like little gray aliens all over the place. I will tell everybody that Colonel Corso told me that what they were most worried about was not the clone or a clone. They were worried about the human type beings that could have created them. And that most of what they considered, extraterrestrial was human type. In other words, could walk. He said, we were afraid they'd walk in the halls of the Pentagon and we wouldn't recognize them. He actually said that. So when I started doing the work, first I started on giant rock, all the giant rock contactees, the 50s and 60s. Right. I did extensive work and realized that was all real back in the 50s and 60s, before the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, which changed the face of everything. The Latin Americans are having contact with these space people walking off ships. And they're seen by 5, 6, 7, 200 people. So whatever is visiting that used to visit Southern California or here in the 50s and 60s has gone to Latin America, mainly because the people have a different view of contact. I mean, they don't think anything of it. I was in Peru and I was with Ricardo Gonzalez and we were shooting a film. And what happened was I went into the bed and breakfast where I was. This older lady was cooking and I said, did you ever see anything? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, from that mountain, 2 space people came down and talked to my children.
Sure. Yeah.
I said, they talked to your children? And she said, yes, they talked to my children. She said, we didn't think anything of it. Then they turned around and walked away. Now, she knew they were space people. They did not put them on television. They did not, do anything special with them. They just said, it's normal. I mean, that's what we have going on here. And this is Peru. I've been to Chile and I've been to Argentina and Colombia. And in Colombia, there's a whole culture of contact down there. So, I think people think, well, we're just going to see lights in the sky. No, there's not just lights in the sky. You're going to see people. You're going to see interdimensional people. You're going to see all kinds of manifestation of consciousness.
Well, and the other thing is that part of it is that the culture is much more accepting. The other part, which is a little more disturbing, is that while there are weapons that are scalar, longitudinal weapons on satellites all over the Earth, the really concentrated land, sea, air measures that target and destroy ET craft when they are in 3D in proximity are in the United States and some other Western countries, and much less so in the developing world. So that's another huge factor. And one of the things that is not talked about much is that even the much ballyhooed Roswell event, which did happen, although there were multiple events actually, that event was precipitated by the euphemism that's used in the military is radar, which is often used for not only tracking an object, but targeting it with a piggybacked system. And there's this memo, as you've seen, that we put out years ago from the FBI that was from a field agent, Guy Hotel, who was writing about the Roswell and the crash and said that it occurred after they switched on a new, quote, radar system at Roswell that caused these objects to get scrambled and were downed because they were in full 3D in 1947. And that was the only nuclear bomb squadron in the world. And the ETs were very concerned about what we might do to this planet and each other, but to other out in space. So that technology was developed in the 40s and is now on its 200th generation of refinement. And so this is a big national security crisis. A lot of people don't know that when I briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency some years back, General Patrick Hughes, who's a 3-star, he had been denied access to these projects. But when I went to the briefing, the central purpose for the briefing was because he didn't know that there were covert operations and even unacknowledged projects within the Defense Intelligence Agency that were denying him information, that were targeting and were working with a group to kill these ETs and their spacecraft and down them, to study them, but also just in acts of hostility from humans towards them. So I find it very comical that the whole media thing that's going on now with TTSA and also the New York Times, CNN, that the release of this Tic Tac footage of our jets chasing these objects off the coast of California, that in every single story without failure, and the History Channel also stories, and I want you to talk about this in a moment about Italy, is this narrative of them being a national security threat, when in reality, these civilizations, of which there are many, are concerned that humans have become a threat, not only to life on Earth, which we're destroying the biosphere, but also could be a threat to other planets, given the nature of the research and development that's happened since the time of Corso And I have many people who I'm working with who, for example, have been in unacknowledged special access projects even as recently as a couple years ago and have retired, who are giving me information on the specifics of what these technologies are, what they can do, what we're doing with it. And it is it's an unacknowledged global emergency that threatens the peace of the earth and peace in space. And no one is talking about that. Instead, they'll release a little dribble of evidence as just an excuse to then attach this narrative, this false hoax narrative of an alien threat, which of course Werner von Braun predicted and warned everyone about prior to his death. And I want to hear you speak of this recent hoax and fraud that's been all over the news from this Italian case that you were there and met the admiral and the people involved.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I was in Italy last year, and my friends told me that the group, the TTSA group, were invited to speak at one of the conferences, but instead they stayed in a barracks. They stayed in a military barracks. And I thought, why, when you get to have a room at the Ritz, you know? But what was happening that I realized when I saw the last episode of the History Channel was they were looking for specific information to show that ETs were hostile. Right. And one of the situations they used was a case that, I left Italy. So just keep in mind, I left Italy permanently in 2007. So I was in touch with everybody there. So one of the cases they used was a case of Caronia in Sicily. And Caronia had a mystery kind of phenomenon where there would be balls of light coming out of the water that would interact with the electrical appliances and the houses would catch on fire. So I was interested in that case, and I was working with he wasn't an admiral then, with a man from the Navy named Claude Bruno Vetruccio. And we were very good friends. I mean, we used to go to dinner together. I knew his wife. I mean, I knew him very well. And before I left, he briefed me and said, Caronia is a big mystery. He said, because there is intelligence is there. They don't hurt anybody. They didn't kill the people in the houses or the dogs or anybody, but it really mystifies us. So we had to move the people out of the city, and we have cameras there. Well, last year I'm watching television. The same guy is telling our people, or the people that are, were there, the TTSA people, that there was a shoot down of a helicopter by a UFO. So I'm going, how can he brief me? And actually he briefed me in the cafeteria of the Naval Academy downtown Rome. I mean, we were sitting there talking with all these Navy people around us. They weren't listening, but he wanted to tell me that it was a mystery. And then the next thing I hear, there's a shoot down of a helicopter by you. First of all, why would a UFO shoot down a helicopter? If people had a half a brain, they'd ask themselves, what is the use of shooting down a helicopter? And it wasn't even shot down. The blades were melted. And the pilot walked out. So the pilot isn't dead. The blades are melted. But he showed this photo because it was proof. For a lot of people, photos are proof, right? So this photo of a UFO and that same helicopter. And all the people in that episode are my friends. I just had dinner with them, so I knew who they all, some of them actually. Yeah. I'm not going to mention names, but you met about two of those years ago when you were in Calabria.
Right.
You met two of those people. And I'm going, what is the purpose? What is the agenda here? Mm-hmm. Because to even announce something like that, there has to be an agenda. There has to be a reason. It's not disclosure. I mean, are you kidding? We have disclosure. I don't know where people are coming from. We've been talking about this for years. If people read books, if they want to get educated, if they watch the we have disclosure. We don't need the president of the United States saying there's UFOs or even gun camera footage. I mean, you just look at Clifford Stone's testimony, my God.
So what are you, before we divert, what is this? So when they, this thing that happened with the TTSA, it seems to be a pattern where they'll take what could be a totally benign sort of situation, create this alarmist national security threat, attached to the supposed evidence. And that seems to be on every case they touch. And then the New York Times and the mainstream media and CNN and the Washington Post cover it religiously. And I know why that's happening, because the intelligence community controls the big media, as we know. But the question is, what actually happened in Italy? And since you have knowledge of that, this should be evidence of them attempting to hoax this narrative and create this false narrative.
Well, there's an agenda, and the agenda is that they went to Harry Reid, they went to Congress, they went to Marco Rubio, they went to all the people that are looking for appropriations for, the next card that Werner von Braun talked about, the next card. They had to have proof, so they used the Italian case as proof.
Mm-hmm.
There's a photo, and it was not a shoot down. Unfortunately, and I don't want to go into detail, there's testing going on in the Mediterranean. And there's testing of exotic weapons. So UFOs are going to be around there watching this.
Well, it's a little more complicated, because the intelligence I have is that a lot of these sort of phenomenon are related to the fact that there may have been UFOs in an area. We go in and, quote, exterminate them. I'm using a term from a naval intelligence person. They then set up some of these classified high-tech human weapons to create phenomenon as a decoy, and then can stage things that look terrible. And this is exactly, by the way, what I think has happened with a number of these cases that are coming out. It's quite likely that this Tic Tac object is a Lockheed Skunk Works experimental anti-gravity vehicle, as opposed to anything extraterrestrial that has been all over the news from the Pentagon. And we also know there's a very famous place that fell into the hands of people in the intelligence community and military and paramilitary operations like Bigelow Aerospace, called the Skinwalker Ranch. And many years ago, there was some amazing contact and phenomenon happening there. I know people who were there when the Skinwalker Ranch got embedded with counterintelligence operatives, who then created or simulated similar, but not exactly the same kind of phenomenon, but in a way that would be scary, to sort of hijack that phenomenon. So what you find is that wherever there's a legitimate ET events happening, they will then go in and do a destroy, search, and replace it with something that are extremely high-tech, covert, unacknowledged technologies will then simulate. No one in the UFO subculture is talking about this, but it makes a great deal of sense if you're trying to create two things. One is you manifest a cover for the real ET stuff and cover it up with something that you're controlling as a human intelligence operation. And the second is you stage it in a way that creates phenomenon that's very spooky and scary, because that will then be attributed to the aliens, quote unquote. And that's really how counterintelligence works. I think at some point I'm going to need to do a whole series of, having dealt with everyone from the director of the CIA and Army intelligence in 92 and 93 forward, of how counterintelligence works, how they hijack events or hoax events that then convince people that there is a hostile alien presence. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I have been reached out to by some very senior people at the CIA about this. And I know that there are a couple of agendas that are being fast-tracked with all these disclosures in the mainstream media. And it's one of the reasons I pushed very quickly to get Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind out. Because I know that in the midst of this pandemic, they are doing a slow rollout of this fake disclosure attached to an evil alien narrative, because that is the ultimate card that they want to play to unite the world around a military fascist junta, or sort of fascistic militaristic state, super state. And that's where we're headed if we're not careful. But I know exactly how this is being done, what the technologies are, who's doing it, where the operation centers are. This is all known to us. And it's really a shame that what you have are, clueless producers with the History Channel and people who are extremely uninformed at TTSA. The boy I had sort of mentored years ago, Tom DeLong, he's a rock star guy. And he stayed here at my home. And they have all brainwashed. So I call it a white brainwash. They're whitewashing and at the same time brainwashing the truth. So they remove, it's a search and destroy on what the truth is, and then spin it, but then they brainwash people about this threat from outer space, which of course Reagan spoke of at the United Nations. It's in our film, but is now what the mainstream media is attaching that narrative. And if you look at what Senator Marco Rubio said a couple weeks ago about the national security threat of the UFOs. So this, I know that Chris Mellon and other people who are associated with TTSA, who worked for the Pentagon in counterintelligence, are actually the ones going up on Capitol Hill doing this. So the public needs to know that there's a rather nasty game going on, and it includes going to a place that may have had, say, UFO legitimate, unusual phenomenon and events, running off that aspect, then replacing it with something that is very convincingly alien, that isn't, that the intelligence community controls, but then does things that are very frightening. Now, to give some perspective to this, I know you weren't there, Paula, but in 1997, when I took Edgar Mitchell, astronaut Edgar Mitchell, to the Pentagon with me to brief Admiral Tom Wilson, and there's been the leak of those notes taken by Davis, the aerospace guy, about that meeting, and everyone was so astonished that it actually happened and that the Admiral confirmed the existence of unacknowledged projects. I think it's kind of crazy that people are so excited about that, because I told the public about it 20 years ago. I don't know if they thought I was making it up or what. I don't make up stuff, you know me. So here's what happened, though. They ended up at this, what I did at this meeting with, before Admiral Wilson, people don't realize the reason I was in Washington was that we had a closed briefing with about a dozen top secret military people coming forward as early disclosure project witnesses before it went public in 2001 for members of Congress. And Representative Dan Burton was there, who was chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee, and others. And this was in April of 1997. Someday we need to do a history of all this, shouldn't we?
Absolutely, yes, I know, a timeline.
We do have some videotapes of this whole thing happening. But the punchline here, there was a man at the meeting who had worked in a SCIF, a secure communication information facility, SCIF, underground, and it was in 1974. Then he was on a interagency committee that had the ability to hit a button, boom, and what would be deployed would be a simulated alien attack on Earth. And I'm quoting from this man, that everyone from the National Military Command Center, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the president on down would absolutely believe it was ET, and it's us. Now, he was on that committee, and I know many people who worked this program, and that was fully operational 46 years ago in 1974. He said it had been around quite a while before he was there. So what people need to understand is that we're sitting ducks here if we don't do disclosure properly, and we must not let the charlatans and half dimwits who are doing this fake disclosure attached to this alien threat narrative hijack everything that we've been working for. And that's why we have to blow the whistle on this. We have to, it's very important that you share that this has been a completely distorted story about the helicopter shoot down. And I would add that most likely, by the time that event happened, this phenomenon that was going on was the use of very high-tech electromagnetic weapons that were human. And that the ETs can control those technologies much better than that. They don't need to accidentally set off a fire alarm in your house. So what I'm pointing out is that I think that this whole thing is a setup. And I know, having been involved now for almost 30 years with people at the level of the CIA director, the head of Army intelligence, people in these unacknowledged special access projects, that we have had for over 50 years, the ability to completely hoax an alien phenomenon that would scare the bejesus out of everybody. It would just scare everyone to death. And it would convince, ironically, the reason they keep a lot of our senior military in the dark is that they would be the people in response to the counterattack. And they don't know that these unacknowledged special access projects have these technologies that simulate alien phenomena. And so that's been going on since the 50s, 60s, 70s. This is nothing new. But this one man, his information was so explosive and his credentials were, his bona fides were impeccable, that night he was visited by people that had worked with him on that command in this unacknowledged special access project. And they took him from the Westin Hotel in Georgetown, where we were holding these meetings for members of Congress. And it was the night before he was going to testify. And he was never heard from and seen again. He left a note under Sherry Adamak's door, who was my assistant, who passed away, and saying that they are begging me not to disclose this yet, that they want a chance to get these projects under control first, but you're doing the right thing. We have this note. And this is from a man who was in the operations center on an interagency committee in 1974, who could fully stage convincingly for the whole world an alien attack. The public, everyone needs to grab this clip of this YouTube thing of what I'm explaining right now and put it viral everywhere, because the public have to be aware of the fact that we have the ability to hoax this stuff.
Yes, and they should start thinking, why in the world will the aliens, after all these years, want to attack the planet Earth? You know, I wonder what people are thinking. There's with everything. I mean, why would they do that? Why? I mean, for what benefit? What would they take our groceries? I mean, why would they want to do that? What people ask first, what the agenda is for every single thing that happens. Mm-hmm. Because if they would ask who benefits,
yes,
why they're doing it, if it has to do, unfortunately, this planet is built on a war economy. I mean, studying Adamski, and he spoke about the 1950s and 60s. There was a thought that we could have had a space economy. It would have made just as much money if we had gone out into outer space, you know, a la Star Trek. You know, we would be out there and they could have made just as much money. But again, as Wernher von Braun said, and Adamski also said, if you have a war economy, you have to create the wars.
Well, and you have to have a war, you have to have an enemy. And, you know, what they learned was that it's a little bit like the Third Reich had to put out all kinds of blood libel and caricatures of gay people and Jewish people and other people that they wanted to have the population hate, because the leaders of the Third Reich, and certainly this, you know, ridiculous Hitler character, couldn't have done that by himself. So the public had to buy in. So what you see now, 70 some years later, is the same fascist militaristic tendencies trying to get the public through the mainstream media to buy into that narrative that there's another new, bigger enemy. Well, who's going to benefit from that? The military industrial complex. But more specifically, it's not about money. It's about the control of the population. It's about control, because people can be controlled through fear.
Fear, exactly. Fear.
Okay, look what coronavirus has done. The entire world shut down. Some estimates, 250 million people are going to die from the shutdown, 100 times more than would die from the virus, in starvation all over the world. So what you have is an attempt to impose fascist state control over everyone's life. Well, if the rolling out of a threat from off the planet does that globally 10 times more than a pandemic will. Although some of the stuff they're doing with the pandemic may just be a beta test for what's coming. So I think we have to wake the planet up, but not just be aware of the problem, be aware of the solution, which is what we started off with,
Yeah.
which is based in consciousness, the human heart and spirit, making peaceful contact, staying with the truth. These are all things we have to redouble and redouble again our effort on, because frankly, I don't think there's a whole lot of runway left before we run out of runway and crash here. Our civilization has got to get its act together on these issues pretty quickly.
I agree. And one of the things I want to say, Stephen, because I am talking to you today, is I will never make any statements on anything that I personally don't know about.
Yes.
I make statements on opinion. I
Right.
can't do opinion. I don't know. The Italian thing, I knew because I was briefed on that, and because I was following that, and because I knew everybody on that particular episode. I knew everyone that was there. I will only make statements on things I really know about or I've covered firsthand. And I'm one of the only researchers that does field research. So it's not based on gossip or what somebody said or whatever. I've gone there. I've talked to the witnesses. I've done the whole background on it. That's the only way to make an informed opinion.
Yes.
So you have to listen to the people, and like you, that have an informed opinion based on information, not off the top of your head or what you think or what your belief system is or whatever. We've talked to, you and I, so many whistleblowers, so many people who've been involved firsthand, and that's the only way that I could come up with an opinion. I just can't make it out of the clear blue sky. So
well, I don't know if you know this now, we have over 985 people like Corso that have come to me now, and some who've been in projects much more involved than what Corso was involved with in the 2000s up until 2012, what have you. And so there's another whole kind of Roswell case going on from 2002 off the Marianas Trench off of Guam, where we apparently downed and retrieved a ET vehicle, and the man who had the top secret clearance, who was on the retrieval vessel, is coming forward with all that information. So there's an enormous amount, and I try to deal as you do with people who were there or they have documents. I've just received, and I can't go into this any further, the most singular, explosive, you talk about photographs, piece of evidence and photograph in UFO history, the provenance of which we're running aground right now. But it will be released. It will rock and change everything. And so I think people need to understand that we have to stick with the facts, but to understand the facts in any context, you can't just stick with the facts of what the ET experience and phenomenon and events are. You have to also equally know what covert human capabilities are. Because if you don't know what a covert human capability is that could simulate an ET event, you're going to be confused every day, all day. And I've been saying this for almost 30 years, that my coming of age on this, because I started out doing CE5 contact. I wasn't interested in disclosure. I wasn't interested in government. I was interested in meditation and consciousness and contact. That was the starting of the project 30 years ago this month. This is our 30-year anniversary of CE5. And I was a young doctor in my 30s, and I just thought, well, this time for this, because an ET visited me and said it's time. So I started that, and of course, everyone knows that within a couple years, we had some amazing contact events. We had that event happen in Florida, near Pensacola, where these 4 ET craft appear in the sky and ends up on the front page of the Pensacola paper the next day. And from there, the head of Army Intelligence is inviting me to a meeting and basically saying, what the hell are you doing? But I think it was then that I realized that, what we're doing for contact was the thing they were most afraid of. Disclosure of witnesses, documents, whatever, is retrospective by nature. It's people who have been here or this event already happened. Doing something in the now, real time, really now, making contact and having hundreds of thousands, and I'm hoping millions of people do it. The intelligence community cannot spin that. They can't control that. This is how we take their power away, my friends. This is why I call this the ultimate act of cosmic civil disobedience. Nonviolent, peaceful, but it completely takes the ball out of their court. And I tell people, you're not going to do it by mucking around trying to find out what happened 5, 10, 20, 70, 80 years ago, although it gives context. The real change that's going to happen, and this is why I'm emphasizing this during this part of our conversation, is people going out making contact. Everybody, I don't care if you're a truck driver or an agricultural worker or a rock star or the chief of staff for the president. Everyone can do this and should do it. And so then you find out for yourself, because seeing is believing. Then you find out that these civilizations are not only very peaceful and non-harmful, but actually quite enlightened and very much versed in consciousness and deep spirituality and the nature of the cosmos as a quantum conscious, beautiful universe. So that's really, to me, where everything we need to continue with disclosure. I'm still working that. And I have some people right now who are very close to leaders in Washington that have reached out. They're probably the most powerful people in Washington, for me to get this correct perspective to the right people in Washington from the top down. And I can't say more about that, but it's an active, like this week, next week program. However, the real action isn't that. To me, that's a public service to whether it's a member of Congress or the president or someone in the Pentagon who is being given wrong information. But the real action is we, the people, taking responsibility for the planet, going out, making contact, and creating that morphogenic field, this living field of consciousness with that 1% effect, where it shifts all of society. That's why I love that 1% phenomenon that we feature in the film Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, where 1% of people meditating in a town and crime rates go down and violence go down, ER visits, I'm an emergency doctor, go down. Yeah. And this coherence in the field of consciousness that grows by only having 1% of the population doing that. So like in America, that's about 3 million people. Well, we should be able to find 3 million people who can wake up to this. And that would transform the world's biggest superpower.
The message in Shasta that I got, and I don't want to go into detail, was the message that I got was one sentence. If you
you mean?
Yes. If you will lead, we will match your efforts.
Yes. I've said that for years.
One sentence. And it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was humanity. If humanity will lead, we will match your efforts. It means for every one step you take, we will help you with 2 steps.
Right.
So what happened with me is they knew I was going to start writing. They knew I was going to start speaking. They knew I was going to be responsible. It was not about me. It's never been about me. But that was a contact experience where I was given that message. If you will lead, we will match your efforts. So you're not alone.
Correct. We aren't. And that's a really message I've gotten all along since my first contact in 1973, when I had just turned 18 up in the mountains of North Carolina. And a lot of people, everyone from Larry King to the CI director have asked me, why don't they just land at the Super Bowl game or at the White House? And a lot of people say, why do we have to do that? I said, because we're the children of Earth. They want to be partners in this, but they don't want to do something that looks like an alien invasion. And let's face it, this is the other problem. There has been 70 years of disinformation and false defamation and caricatures of ETs that everyone has been drinking that Kool-Aid. Everyone. The abduction groups, the mutilation groups, UFO lore, Hollywood movies, Independence Day, Alien the movie, on and on and on and on and on. And everyone's so totally brainwashed that if they were to do anything too frontal, too out there, immediately the media and these covert programs would seize on and say, see, we're being invaded. So look, with my meager IQ, if I have figured this out, I can tell you the ETs have figured it out because they're cruising around with IQs of 400 or 500. All right. Top of the scale for humans is 200. So, so being quite blunt about it, people say, yeah, I'm like, a kindergartner. But so I tell people we have to understand they know the milieu, the environment of the earth has been poisoned on this subject so badly that we humans are going to have to lead the effort in not only making peaceful contact, but opening up the world to their presence in a way that doesn't trigger this militaristic false narrative that we see rolling out before our eyes. I mean, Paul, every week there's a new article in the mainstream media about the UFO subject with somebody in authority putting it in a national security threat sort of paradigm. And so we're going to have to quicken and increase our efforts, obviously.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What should we tell everybody in the time remaining? How can they share the film? How can they have part in this? Because it isn't just us. We can't do it alone.
Oh,
so
no.
we have to have people of goodwill.
And we need millions of them.
Yes.
Millions.
The responsibility right now. I mean, whether they tell people to watch the film,
right. Everyone's locked down or can't do with their normal stuff. They could watch Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, but they should also now, to get context. I don't know if you know this, but a week or so ago, Unacknowledged moved over off of Netflix onto Amazon Prime. But right now, it's only available in English-speaking countries. In a few weeks, it'll be global in Latin America. So anyone who has Prime can see it for free, and it's up there now. And we eventually want that to happen for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. We're working as hard as I can with the distribution company to get it even wider so that it's everywhere. And so what we're going to try to do is to get both those films that are good educational beginners points for the masses on every free streaming platform, like ones you don't even have to have a subscription for. And so we're working very hard to get that done. And that's going to be coming out more and more this fall. But I think in the meanwhile, everyone should get folks to look at both of those, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind and Unacknowledged, but also get the app. The app is actually what we added to this new app. It just came out a couple months ago. Is that now, if you get that app, if you have a smartphone, you go to it's CE5 Contact app. You can actually see who's in Boulder, Colorado, that is doing or interested in CE5. So you can. It's kind of like a dating app where you can hook up with them and go out and do a little team, even with social distancing out in the wilderness. So we have done this so that anyone in the world can learn the remote viewing, the meditation, the contact protocols, what the philosophy is and the intention is of the project. But also you can then see who's in your area. And the more people who get on there, the more people there will be to choose from. Because in some areas there might be 500 people, but you only want to meet up with a few people who are on your wavelength and that you're harmonious with. So we did that. It was a very big project to get that feature included. And I would say rather expensive. We have to host it. Have to pay a fortune to host the messaging and the maps. We have to pay monthly for that. People say, why is there a charge for this app? I said, because we're paying a lot so that people have that interactivity. People are so naive. They think everything happens for free. It doesn't. You do something like this where you get zillions of people using it, then you're running into 6-digit expenses, over time. So what we're trying to do, though, is get it out there so that people, if you're in a remote area in Africa, you'd be surprised how many people there are in Africa that have this app. You could find someone and do an expedition and do contact, so you're not by yourself. So it has that feature as well as all the educational material. It has the Sanskrit puja. It has the meditation training. It has the remote view training. It has the CE5 contact protocols, the equipment you may want to have. It has all that in the app. So that's something everyone can do. And they can do it even under, quarantine or whatever. You can just do it with a few people who are in your pod, as they're calling it, or friends group, and go out and do it. So that's something everyone can do. And the other thing that everyone can do is to continue to network this to people who can be whistleblowers or who have information, because they need to contact us at our website, seriousdisclosure.com. And the reason for that is that, this, Paula, a lot of what I have to do, I'm not allowed to talk about publicly, not because I'm under any kind of national security edict. I refuse to sign one. It's because you have to maintain confidence when you're dealing with people that are very high ranking in society. But I'm putting together material for very high ranking people actively, and certainly before the election. And so what we need to be able to do is get the best of that in, and the most current. So that's another appeal I would make to people, because if you just scratch the surface of programs and people who work in programs, there are tens of thousands of people who worked in these underground facilities over the years and dealt with this issue. And they need to know they can come forward confidentially. I have never violated a confidence, and get us whatever material, information, documents, or just their own knowledge to us, because we really need that, not only to eventually, educate the public, but to educate policymakers and decision makers who are being inundated with hoaxed material. They're being inundated with this History Channel rubbish and TTSA spin. So that's what our leaders are being inundated with, and it's really dangerous. So we need to do something that is gets the truth to those people.
Well, I'm on my way to Crestone in about a week or so. I have 5 acres in Crestone. That's after I did the movie Serious. I went and bought land up there. And yep. I'm going to do what I can do on a subconscious level, on another level, because I think we need to quiet our minds and make this a serious situation. Right. So it's like Close Encounters of the Third Kind changed my life and started me on this path. I really recommend to everybody the movie that I love the most, and that's Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
And that's where the action is, people doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I hope to see you soon.
Me too.
We're still, just so as a programming note to everyone listening, we're still from lockdown trying to figure out how to do a belated
party
event. We're working on it. We've had some false starts and then found out we couldn't do it. So given the restrictions with COVID, we're trying to put that together. I know there are a number of people who were wanting and expecting to come. Certainly Paula was. But as soon as we have a venue locked in, and it's set up so it can be safe and meet all the requirements of the state, local, federal requirements, we'll announce that if we can make it happen. We're trying very hard to do so. I know Paula's lobbying to do it.
I know. I want fireworks. I told
you. You don't want to hand fireworks to me. I'll blow up the stage. But
no, we got to do it big. We could do a tailgating party with fireworks.
Yeah, we can do tailgating. Well, that's the other thing. If anyone lives in, the Las Vegas or Phoenix area, who knows of a drive-in that we could rent for a night, we could do. I like joking about the fact that, because I'm, as you know, Paula, I'm poor white trash. I grew up North Carolina with no money and living in a shack, a 2-room shack with no heat, no air conditioning. Anyway, so drive-ins were all the rage when I was a kid in the 60s.
Oh, me too.
So now it's become the rage again. Garth Brooks is doing a whole tour with the drive-in. So if anyone can help us find a place that we could, just sort of rent the whole place for a night. We could set up a stage in front of the drive-in. Everyone could be in their cars, and we'll have some huge fun thing outside. I think that's kind of what we're thinking of trying to do. That I think it'd be a great deal of fun. But if anyone has a direct way of finding a place for us pretty soon on that, obviously, the winter is going to be coming, October, November. Once you get much past then, it's not practical to do an outside event. But if someone can help us find a place, or knows of a really good place, and we probably would want to have a place that would hold 250 to 500 cars in that range, because you could have 3 or 4 people to a car, and it would be a fun event. So I just wanted people to know, I know a lot of people listening were planning to come to the premiere. Some people are going to come to the after party. That obviously got canceled in April because of COVID, but we're trying, folks. So it's not that we haven't forgotten about it.
Keep the faith. I think we can do this.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I appreciate everyone tuning in, and just spread the word, and you can share this link to this interview. And I just want to thank again Paula Harris, who's just an amazing researcher, a brilliant mind, and a great friend. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Stephen. Anytime.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.